Hey Alan, you want to go work on the Grand National?
Yeah, boss. I love working on the car.
Hey, I want to go. Take me with you.
No, Victor, you run away when you go outside. You gotta stay in. Alan, you ready to get started?
No, boss. I want to play.
All right, Alan. Well, we can play a little bit, and then we got to work on the car. Alan, do you want your ball? You want your ball? Go get it, Alan. Get your ball. Today on Make Stuff Nation, I'm going to be fixing the power antenna on the Grand National. So this is a really common problem with older cars with power antennas. The cable that drives the antenna up and down will snap and leave the antenna in whatever the last position it was in when the cable snapped. Fortunately, you can get replacement cables, and it's just a matter of disassembling the antenna motor, replacing the cable, and then reinstalling it. Now, unfortunately, one of the problems with these 1980s GM G body style cars is that you can't access that antenna motor under the hood. You actually have to remove the front right fender. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. We'll get that motor out and replace the cable. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is find the antenna wires and connections. So under the hood here, on the back left side, you can see here is the connector for the power antenna. And then hidden away back under these components is the coax cable for the actual antenna signal. You can see it's looped around. Here's where it starts the loop, and here's the other side of the loop. It's wrapped around this screw, so we're going to take this screw out to be able to free up that coax cable and give us some slack. Maybe this one. Nope, way too big. Ah, come on. Definitely 7 mil though. All right, here we go. There we go. All right, now we should be able to pull this coax cable out. All right, it appears we're hung up on something else back behind here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pop this bracket off, be able to move this whole assembly, and then be able to get at that cable, no problem. Don't drop it. Got it. And one more on this end. There we go. Now this whole assembly should just move out of the way. Ah, there we go. So there we go. We were fighting this little clip here. So we'll just unclip the coax cable. And loosen it up here. Now I've read that this coax connector is a one-time press fit, so we're not going to disconnect it. I've heard that if you disconnect it, it damages it and you'll never be able to get it back together. Now that we have access to these wires though, we are going to disconnect the power connector so that we can feed it down once we get the fender unhooked. As you can see here, down here is the hole where the coax and the power cable feed out to the motor that's inside the fender. I'm also going to tie some string around this connector that feeds down through to the motor. That way we can fish it back through once we've installed the new antenna cable. There we go. All right, now for the fun part, removing the fender so we can get at the antenna motor. Okay, down here in the wheel well, we need to remove 4 bolts.
It's these interior bolts that attach the outside metal fender to the inside wheel well liner. There's 4 bolts, one at the 9 o'clock position, one at the 2 o'clock position, one at the 1 o'clock position, and another at the 11 o'clock position. These are 10mm bolts. There's 2. 3. And 4. We also need to remove this washer nut that locks the antenna down. Sometimes you can just remove it with your fingers. Other times you can use some of the split ring pliers to loosen it up and then get it with your fingers. Then just slide this up and off the antenna. Okay, now there's 4 bolts back on this side of the fender that we need to get at. To get at those bolts, you need to open the passenger door all the way. Here on the back side of the fender, you can see some of the bolts that we need to move. There's a total of 3 that do not have a star washer, and then 1 that does have a star washer. The one with the star washer is the one that actually mounts the antenna motor in place. These are also 10mm bolts. And be careful not to scratch your paint. There, it's loose. We get it the rest of the way with the finger. Maybe. There's 2. 3. And now the 4th one is the one with the star head on, or star washer. And I just felt the antenna drop down. So we're going to hear it drop off when I take this out. Just get the rest of the way, fingers. And even hold on to the antenna to keep it from crashing down. Okay, we've got all the bolts out. Now I'm just going to very gently pop the fender out, and we'll just feed the antenna down through the opening here. I can feel the motor, so I just need to get about another 1.5 inches of clearance. Almost there. Feed the wires down from the top a bit. Okay. There we go. Just being careful not to bend the antenna. Next, we need to disconnect the antenna coax here right at the mast. Okay, so I got the power wire from up top. It should be free. Oh, it's hung up around the coax wire. Here's the connector. And there's our wire, or our string to fish it back through. So there's one. And now we're just going to use a Phillips screwdriver to disconnect the coax from the antenna mast. And we'll clean these wires up nice and good when we put it back together. So there's the coax cable. We're going to leave that in the car. And now we just have to get this out of here without bending the antenna. There we go. Now we can disconnect our fishing line. And we'll take it in the shop and swap out the cable and get her all cleaned up for a reinstall. Here I've got it on the workbench. I've got the antenna replacement from Kerbin Performance. I'll put a link down in the description. They've got all sorts of great parts for Turbo Regals and Grand Nationals. Basically what we need to do though, we need to open up the housing, take the old cable out, put in the new one. First we're going to remove these little spring clips around the outside of the housing. Just going to use a screwdriver to gently pry them off. Make sure they don't go flying anywhere. There's one. Two. 3. And 4. There are also 4 rivets that we need to drill out, but we need to make sure we don't damage this plastic housing. There's one here, one in the center of the winding mechanism, a third here, and a fourth up here. I'm going to start with a 5.5 millimeter drill and see how that works. We can always go up from there. Well, that's not even really touching it. Let's see about this side. Ah, that rivet's just spinning around. That's why. Try this one. That one's spinning too. Well, those rivets are just spinning around in their holes, so I can't drill them. What I'm going to do is get my Dremel out and try to use a small grinder attachment to grind the heads of the rivets off without damaging the plastic housing. Go for these easy ones first. That looks like it might have done the trick. Let's see if we can push it through. Pop it out from the other side. Yep, there's one. That looks like 2. Come on, little guy. One's being stubborn. There we go, 3. And this fourth one's going to be a doozy. I've got this little itty bitty ball burr. We'll try that. It appears to be cutting the rivet nicely. It's just hard to see what you're doing. There we go. There we go. That does it. Now I just have to punch it through. There we go. That's rivet number 4. So we want to make sure to save these 4 clips. Before I open this, I'm going to brush off the outside, try to get rid of as many of those little metal shavings as I can from those rivets. I don't want them getting in the mechanism. There we go, that looks pretty good. To open this up, I'm just gently going to pry along the plastic casing here. There's some silicone sealant up around the bottom of the antenna mast, so just be careful to remove that and not break anything. These old power antennas are quite well built, so if you can rebuild them, it's best to use the original. The new ones just aren't the same. Unfortunately, they just used a plastic antenna cable rather than a metal one, which is what we're replacing it with. Easy does it. There's the antenna mast. You can see the cable's not even connected. And then this just opens up nice and easy. That silicone's just sticking a little bit. There we go. So I'm going to clean up all these parts, hit some of the metal ones with brake clean, just wash off the others, and then we'll get ready to install the new cable wire. We can pull the old one out here. You can see the antenna is retracting. There we go. I'm also going to take the antenna out and clean the whole thing. I'm also going to straighten it so it's nice and in good condition for the reinstall. So I've got some rubber grippy pad here. I'm just going to fold it over. I'm going to wrap it around the antenna top here, then clamp on some vice grips. Then I'm going to do the same on the antenna mast. All right, let's try this other way around. Oh yeah, that's moving. Oh yep, that loosened up nice. There we go, no scratches. Also, you can see this plug here, that just removes, it's threaded. You can use a screwdriver to remove it to get the antenna out. There we go. Get a hold of the old antenna wire. Pull that puppy right out. Should be able to take out the rest too. It's pretty crusty. No wonder the old cable broke. We're gonna get that all nice and clean though. There we go. So here's the antenna. Pretty good condition. We're gonna hit it with some brake clean, clean it all up, roll it to straighten it. All right, well, I've got everything cleaned up. I think we're ready for reassembly. Some amount of grease in the gear section. Work it around. Some on the teeth of the gear. Awesome. Put some on the worm gear on the other half. Now I got the antenna all cleaned up. Used some pipe cleaners to clean out the inside. Straightened it up a bit. Moves nice and smooth now. I'm going to put that back in the mast. I've already took the finial off the antenna. I'm going to slide that up and put the finial back on. Get it nice and snug. And extend the antenna all the way out. All right, so after we put the antenna in, we can screw the retainer back on. Just slide it over the cable. Wind it up. Try not to cross thread it. Get it started. Then you can just use a little pick to twist it the rest of the way in. There we go. Next we need to put the seals on. This keeps weather out of the motor component. Put on the felt part and then the little rubber gasket. The triangular end points down into the housing. All right, now we can set the mast back in the housing. Dropping it is technique only. And then line up this weather seal with the spot for it on the housing. Once you've got that lined up, rotate the cable. Rotate the hook up to 90 degrees, so perpendicular to the housing. Rotate it and just it snaps into place down in the bottom of the gear. Then you can rotate the gear to take up the slack and adjust the seals, make sure everything's lined up nicely. Now this comes with the factory with silicone up around the top of the motor that keeps water from getting in, and then there's a hole in the bottom of the housing for water to drain out. So we need to replace that so it doesn't rust. So I just got some multi-purpose white silicone, 100% waterproof. I'm just going to run a bead in the little line where there used to be. You don't want to run too much because it could squeeze out into the motor components. Just going to lift the antenna up, make sure I don't miss any spots, get around the seal. Again, I'm going to run it partially down the housing. And then you don't put any in the bottom, that way any water that does happen to get in can run out. Okay, the tricky part in lining this top to put it back on are these two bearings. They move side to side, so you have to line them up with their respective spots in the bottom housing. There we go. Just adjust the wires here, and it's back together. I can reinstall the 4 clips. There's one. Two. Three. And 4. Now we have to replace these rivets. Just going to use some plain old pop rivets. They should do the trick. Yeah, that's nice and secure. I'm going from the other side on this one. There's 2. Three. And I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get this 4th one. We'll see how it goes. Looks like it's a little too deep in there for me to get. Let me see if I can work something out. Okay, so I took a new pop rivet and knocked the center nail out. I'm going to slide that over the body of this one. That should give me just enough reach to be able to pop it down in this deep hole here. There we go, that's our spacer. And that's nice and secure. Awesome. The antenna install is going to be the exact opposite of how we removed it. So first I'm going to tie our line back up so we can fish this wire through. There we go. Okay, now that we've hooked the line back up to fish up the power wire, we're ready to put the antenna back in. To make things easier, I've dropped down another line through the antenna hole to tie around the finial, which will help us thread the antenna up through the proper spot. If you had a way to power up the antenna motor, you could retract the antenna. That would also make this easier. All right, now we're ready to gently thread the antenna back up through. There we go. It's through the hole. Now that we've got it started, we can hook the coax cable back up. Just get the screws nice and snug. Make sure you're not cross-threading them. They are just into sheet metal, so you don't want to over-tighten them and strip them out. There, now we can feed the antenna back up into position. Once we have it part way, we can work on the wires. Grabbing the line for the power cord, I'm going to fish that up through. Almost got it. There we go. So now we have the power connector where we want it. I'm going to hook it up so it doesn't fall back through. And then we can disconnect our fishing cord. Since we have the antenna through where we want it, we can disconnect that string also. Now it's just a matter of getting the antenna the rest of the way up into position. Alright, it's about in position. Just need to get the bracket adjusted to the right spot so we can screw it back in. So here you can get a good look at this is the mounting bracket for the antenna, and here's the hole for the star-shaped screw. It's just the screw through the fender into the mounting bracket, so we can get that lined up and started now. Just get a couple threads started. Now we can start to put the fender back into place. We just need to pry the fender so it goes back over the inside wheel well housing. There we go. Right back in place. There we go. All the holes are lined up, so we can start reinstalling bolts. Start them finger tight at first, make sure everything lines up, make sure you're not cross-threading anything. That one went nicely. Okay, I've got all the screws in the wheel well finger tight, so I'm going to start tightening them up. I already got the front two done, I've got the back three to do, but I'm going to get the ones on the door started. That way everything lines up correctly. Back here at the door, we've got 4 screws to put in, one here at the bottom, another above it, alright, so I've got the 4 regular screws started by hand. I've got the screw with the star washer that goes into the mounting bracket started by hand. It's getting dark pretty quick here though, so I'm going to tighten these up, and then I'll show you the rest of what we have to do up top. It's getting way too dark outside, so I've moved back into the garage here. So we've got the fender all reattached. Last thing to do is tighten up the little screw here on top. Just use some split ring pliers. Just tighten it down nice and snug. Be careful not to scratch the paint. To finish up the inside of the car, I fished up the rest of the coax cable. And I'm just going to hook it back in this clip like it was before. There we go. As far as these two connectors, we can hook it up and the antenna retracts. Although the connections aren't very good, but for now it works. Last thing we have to do is screw this bracket back in place. I'm going to install this screw first since that was the most difficult one to get to. There we go, just snug. Now we can get this bracket back in place. There we go. So the antenna extends and retracts just like we want it to. Unfortunately, those terminals on the power connector are corroded and you have to jiggle them to get it to activate sometimes. You enjoying your spot in the sun there, Alan? Don't get too hot. You can come in the shade. So to rebuild these connectors, first we need to take the pins out. What I've done, there's a little plastic tab here I've used just a pick to pop that tab up. That releases the tops of the pins. And then you can slide another pick in below to release the prong that locks the pins into place on the bottom. And then they just pull right out. Save the connector, and now we just need to clean these up with some sandpaper, just real fine grit sandpaper. I'm going to use some needle nose pliers to bend them back to the right shape and then hit them with some electrical terminal cleaner. I have some cardboard here just to keep everything clean. Got some 400 grit sandpaper, just going to come in, sand these terminals a little bit. Alright, that one's looking good. Nice and shiny on the contact points. And now for the third terminal. This one's really crusty. I think this was the culprit for it not retracting. I'm going to hit them with a little bit of an electric terminal cleaner. Just let those dry. I'm going to work on bending these back into the right shape. Alright, gray is the middle one. This connector is all set, so I'm going to reinstall it. See how it fits. Oh yeah, that locks into place nice and positively. Nice tight connection, unlike the old ones. Do the same on these others. Press it in with the pick. There we go, got a nice positive lock on that. They're not slipping in and out like they used to be. They're nice and solid. Last thing to do, just press this down to lock them into place permanently. So we've got the female connector fixed. Now we just need to clean the pins on the male connector. These male pins are much easier to remove. Just above the pin, you'll see there's a little hole. Just take an awl or pick, press it down in. It's going to disengage that locking tab, and then the pin just pulls right out. And 3. Easy peasy. I'm going to do the same thing with these pins as with the others. Just hit them with a little sandpaper, then some terminal cleaner. And the other side. That's looking nice. Hit them with some terminal cleaner. And then this is the little retaining tab. So I'm just going to stick this pick under here to bend it back up so it'll lock the tab in position. There we go. For reinstalling them, we want to make sure they match up with opposite sides. So we'll start with green. Make sure our connectors are lined up. Green is A. That matches on here. We go ahead, line up the terminal, and just press it in until it clicks. There we go. There's one. Gray goes in the middle. There's two. And then white goes on the other side. Press it through from the back with the pick. There we go. Nice and clean, shiny. These are nice. They press together. We'll hook it up. Feels like a pretty solid connection. Tuck that away. Let's give it a try. Hey little guy, you want to go for a ride? What do you think of the antenna, huh? Well, that wraps up the antenna repair on this 87 Grand National. The antenna extends when we turn the radio on and retracts when we turn the radio off, just like when it left the factory. I showed you how to pull the fender out to remove the antenna housing. We learned how to open up that antenna motor housing, take the old cable out, clean up the antenna in parts, put the new cable in, and close the housing. I also showed you how to reinstall the housing and then clean up the electrical terminals. As far as the fender removal part of this video, that's going to be applicable to any of the G-body style GMs back in the late 80s. As far as the antennas, GM put those power antennas in millions and millions of cars, so you can use those instructions to fix your power antenna on lots of cars that are still driving on the roads today. And then as far as electrical terminals, I don't know a car that doesn't have electrical terminals that's on the road today. So you can use those tips, just use some sandpaper and terminal cleaner to get those terminals just like new. That'll allow you to leave your wire harness stock factory condition. If you have any suggestions for new projects, throw it down in the comments. I really hope you found this video useful. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on notifications. And I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching Make Stuff Nation.